Guys, we are continuing on this particular speech by Minister Pandor, and in this particular video, she calls out the role or the negative role played by Israel and Morocco on the African continent. One of the things that I love about Minister Naledi Pandor is that she calls a spade a spade. She's a diplomat, but she's brave. She's not afraid to state her views and her case. Let's listen to this particular clip where she calls out Israel and Morocco and the negative role that she thinks they're playing in the African continent.
I'm very glad to be here. I begin by saying the world is a very troubled place, and I don't want us to pretend that it is easy. It's not. We are faced with a very challenged world. I realized this when in 2021 I was sitting in a summit of the Executive Council of the African Union, and it was whispered to me that the African Union Commission chairperson had issued an invitation to Israel to become an observer at the African Union. Imagine my horror. I decided at that moment that I would raise my arm.
I think that Africa is suffering from a leadership problem. That's just my opinion. We have a lot of leaders that are willing to put the lives of Africans aside and decide with their pockets. I think that most of our leaders in the continent are easily bought, and they cater to their own interests and forget the interests of the masses and the people. How can an African Union representing Africans allow Israel, who consider themselves to be a part of Europe, to be a part of the African Union? Like, how can they observe African affairs when they're not Africans? This just says a lot about the state of leadership in the African continent, and Dr. Pandor calls it as she sees it. Let me continue playing this clip and I will share my views afterwards.
Imagine my horror. I decided at that moment that I would raise my arm and would propose that this decision be rescinded. I walked around the room seeking supporters. Of the 54 nations, I got 3. And I include SADC in that. But I said, nevertheless, this is not going to happen. I therefore lifted my arm and said, I wish to table a matter. I have learnt of this, and as South Africa, we object to it, and it must not be implemented. We want our leaders to discuss it. And we will never accept it as South Africa, and while we appreciate the role that the Organization of African Unity played in us achieving our freedom as South Africa, this decision of the AU Commission chairperson will make us consider whether we can be present in the African Union. I thought I would get support from many of the countries gathered in the room. But what I discovered is that countries that are oppressors, that continue to be colonial occupiers, are using financial muscle to provide grant in aid to African countries.
The argument that Dr. Pandor is making here is that poor African countries that are dependent on aid from Western countries or, countries of much wealth or wealthier countries than them are easily threatened, right? Like these nations will say we are cutting aid. We saw that with what happened with the bill that Uganda passed, and the Americans, we are against that LGBTQ bill. They threatened to cut aid. And so the argument that she's making is that these countries use their wealth, they use money to force smaller African countries to side with them because they are threatened that if we do not side or if we do not agree with this superpower nation or with this bigger nation aid, we won't be giving money. So they are forced to agree to decisions that they would normally not agree to. Guys, whoever has the cash controls the game. Whoever has money controls the game. So she's saying the reason she was not supported was that these countries, these oppressors, as she calls them, threaten these smaller countries that if you do not do what we say, we will cut aid from you. You won't get money. So she's calling out those countries that, we are aware of what you guys are doing. But yeah, let's just continue and hear out.
But what I discovered is that countries that are oppressors, that continue to be colonial occupiers, are using financial muscle to provide grant in aid to African countries and secure the depoliticized support of African countries for these oppressive nations. Among them are Israel and Morocco. They're playing a very negative role in Africa. And comrades, I'm being frank here. So anyway, on my story, on the presence of Israel as an observer in the African Union, I have managed to pause it for now with the support of my president, but it's not off the table in the AU. So again, I'm asking you, pay attention.
This African minister, she's standing her ground. She's representing a people. She may not be a president, but she is an influential leader, and she's calling out nations that are acting unfairly toward these smaller African countries that are dependent on aid. Having said that, I think it's time for Africa to unite so that we can help each other out and not depend on aid from foreign nations. Because whoever has the money controls the game. For as long as Africa is dependent on aid and on these countries, Africa will forever be controlled by these bigger powers. We'll be dragged, here and there. So it's time for Africa and the African Union to be independent of foreign influences. It's time for them to come together and make decisions that benefit Africans. Guys, Dr. Naledi Pandor has said it. I don't know. Comment down below. What do you think of the views? I just thought that this was an interesting observation and an interesting call. Thank you so much for joining me. If you found value in this video, be sure to like, to subscribe, because there's a lot of content like this coming. And just comment down below, man, which other videos do you suggest I react to? Or, other intelligent conversations that we can all learn from. Guys, thank you for joining me. God willing, I will see you on the next one. Cheers for now.